All of us remember President Dole and President McCain and President Romney. Now, look, those are good men. They're decent men. But when you don't stand and draw a clear distinction, when you don't stand for principle, Democrats celebrate.
Former Senator Bob Dole is firing back at comments Senator Ted Cruz made a month ago, telling his home state newspaper, quote, "A number of the younger members, first-termers like Rand Paul, Marco Rubio, and that extreme right-wing guy, Ted Cruz, all running for president now? I don't think they've got enough experience yet." Dole's in the middle of barnstorming Kansas, riding from town to town in his home state, joking, "I'm trying to cover all 105 counties. I don't know whether I'll make it or not, but when you're 90, you don't order room service." His message, compromise is not a bad word, and the GOP should be what he calls a party of inclusion.
If you get to know people, you can work with them. And I'm a Republican, but the Democrats are my friends, and so we had a lot of stuff that was bipartisan, and they don't have it today. You know, it's the little things that people remember. It's how you treat people and how you expect to be treated, and you have to have time for people. I used to go out in the hall of my office, and when I saw Kansans coming, I'd drag them into the office, whether they wanted to come or not.
Dole joked yesterday, "If something happens to me before the 2016 election, I plan to vote absentee, but I plan to be around." And we all hope for that. And he said he's touring the state to say thank you.
I wouldn't have had the opportunities I've had without your support. And I never forgot where I was from. I say you can take the boy out of Kansas, but you can't take Kansas out of the boy.
Let's bring in our hump day gaggle. Politico's Manu Raju, Democratic strategist Steve McMahon, and Republican ad maker Kim Alfano. All thank you so much for joining me. And Kim, I'll start with you. Bob Dole, World War II hero, someone who's had a long career in the U.S. Congress, well respected by both sides of the aisle, almost sort of having this sort of last push, this last little bit of service on behalf of the establishment. And this sort of correlates with what we've seen over the last few weeks with the rise of Jeb Bush and the rise of other party elders, Mitt Romney coming back. The establishment is striking back against the upstarts.
Bob Dole clearly doesn't like Ted Cruz. Bob Dole doesn't like Ted Cruz. He made that clear. You know, there's kind of a weird thing going on in the party where the upstarts kind of screwed up the 2010 elections. And there's been a backlash against that from the establishment. Yet this year's crop of upstarts are vastly different. They're a lot more disciplined. They speak a lot more clearly. They're less gaffe, prone. And they are, it's going to be a harder thing to say Washington makes sense, being an insider makes sense. I mean, how do you fight that war if you're on the establishment side? So, I think that the ideology fights are going to be more important to the party than necessarily establishment versus Tea Party, because we can't just look at them and say, if you're a part of the establishment, you can't just look at the Tea Party and say they're all, kooks. Right. They're not.
Most of them are.
They are not. They are
sure,
not.
You make your money that way. But Democrats here, they did a good job in 2012 of sort of sitting back, letting this all play out. You sort of saw Todd Aiken and that phenomenon. Is that the playbook moving forward for D's?
Well, it worked in 2012. I mean, Lee Atwater, who is a former, he's deceased now. He's a great Republican strategist. He used to say, when your opponent is shooting themselves, don't get in the way. Right. If they're destroying themselves, don't get in the way.
They're drowning, throw them in anvil.
Well, yeah, so that was the playbook that worked pretty well in 2010. The Republicans nominated Nuts, and they lost seats they should have won. In 2012, they nominated Nuts again, and they lost a couple of seats that maybe they would have won otherwise. Democrats are going to sit back and hope that they do the same thing, because it doesn't work electorally and it doesn't win, and that's they seem to be following
this fight for the soul of the party. You just saw firsthand in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, and probably the primary fight of his life right now, taking a lot of opposition. Ted Cruz refusing to publicly endorse him. Rand Paul not very vocal on his behalf. This is playing out in local politics quite vividly.
That's right. And you're seeing folks like Lindsey Graham going very aggressively after the Tea Party and really building campaign machines, political operations early in order to fend off these challenges from the right. Lindsey Graham essentially has maneuvered his way to prop up a lackluster field running against him, sort of kept the House Republicans who are running against him out of that race. You've seen other people do similar type things against their primary challengers. People like Lamar Alexander, who should be vulnerable in the Republican primary. He'll be fine.
Fortifying.
That's right. Mitch McConnell probably will survive his primary. These guys, these Republican incumbents, generally will sort of look like they're all probably going to survive, other than maybe Thad Cochran in Mississippi. Yeah. But the question will be open seats. What will happen in those Democratic seats and open seats in Georgia, Louisiana, Georgia, North Carolina? Will the Republicans nominate?
Sort of that John McCain 2010 playbook of fortify your right flank. Let's stay in the South, and we had Nacone from the New York Times on earlier, talked about the power of incumbency on the Democratic side in these southern races. Sort of that if you go back through the 70s, through the 90s and the 2000s, an incumbent Democrat has a much better chance of winning than an open seat Democrat in the South. What do Republicans have to do to get at folks like Mark Pryor and get at people like Mary Landrieu?
Well, this is a case where we just have to sit back and let them shoot themselves. I mean, these guys have to defend Barack Obama this year. They have to defend Obamacare, and it's a very uncomfortable thing to do in a southern race. In addition, I mean, you only need to look at the NRCC, I mean, the DNC, the DCCC, whichever C it is, the C thing with the Democrats. You have to look at them. They're yanking funding from challengers and pouring it into, incumbents, because they do realize this is a indefensible place to be right now, especially in the South.
Is that why Mark Pryor has a lead in Arkansas and why Mary Landrieu has a lead in Louisiana?
Yeah, but you got to believe that, and I don't necessarily buy that.
Well, okay, so we can just pretend
Landrieu, but I don't buy polling.
You believe the polling when it suits you, but the polling is pretty consistent. Mark Pryor is running a great campaign, and there's something about Democrats in red states. They've been successful before. I mean, granted, it's a red state. It's a state that Mitt Romney carried. But these are people who have run in red states their whole lives. And guess what? They win. And the reason they win is because they reflect the values and the constituencies of those red states. Mark Pryor is no exception. Mary Landrieu is no exception. Democratic incumbents have huge advantages. And one of the advantages they have in the South is that they understand the state they're running in, and they know how to do it.
They have legacies, too. Pryor, Landrieu, names that really resonate with voters.
The politics of the personal and the seniority.
That's right. But the challenge for Democrats will be turnout in this election. I mean, the intensity is on the Republican side. Obamacare is an issue that does drive out Republican voters to the polls. They tend to do better in midterm elections. How do Democrats bring out their voters? That's going to be the key going
forward. And Matt, real quick from your perch and covering the Senate, Harry Reid, there's not going to be any controversial votes from here on forward. We're probably just going to get a lot of unemployment insurance votes.
Oh, right? Yeah, minimum wage, things that can drive a wedge between the two sides. I don't see that really any effort to put Mark Pryor in a tough position, Mary Landrieu in a tough position. This is going to be something to put Republicans on the defense.
Something to keep an eye on. Manu, Steve, Kim, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. That's it for this edition of the Daily Rundown.